The Harvard professor stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, staring at the equation he'd written there 3 years ago. "Nobody solved this," he'd said in lectures 1,000 times, almost like a prayer. "Not in 30 years, not in 50. Then, during office hours on a Tuesday in March, a black girl from the Bronx named Zara walked in, looked at the board for 28 seconds, and wrote down the answer. He watched her hand move across the white space. When she finished, he couldn't speak for almost a minute. But that's the ending, not the beginning. Let me take you back to where things were still normal, before the world folded in on itself, before I understood that being smart could be the most dangerous thing you carried. My name is Zara Mitchell, and I was 17 years old, living in a 2-bedroom apartment on 149th Street with my mom, my little brother Malik, and the smell of my mom's hair salon that never quite left the walls. The salon was called Crown Works, and she ran it out of the ground floor of our building, a place where every black woman within 5 blocks came to get their edges laid, their locks twisted, their souls restored. My mom Diane had been doing hair for 23 years, ever since she was my age, and she could make magic happen with her hands. She could read a woman's face and know exactly what would make her feel like herself again. I spent my mornings before school sitting at the kitchen counter, eating cereal straight from the box while watching my mom get ready. She'd stand in front of the mirror in our bedroom, which you could see from the kitchen if the door was open, braiding her own hair while humming gospel songs she didn't think I knew the words to. Her hands moved like they had their own brain. I'd inherited that, not the hair braiding, but the way her hands knew what to do before her mind caught up. In my case, it was numbers, patterns, the architecture of how things fit together. "You eating all my Honey Nut Cheerios again?" she'd call out, not turning around. "They're in the pantry for a reason, Ma." "Yeah, the reason being Malik, not you. That boy's got a growth spurt happening and a hollow leg to match." Malik was 14 and currently obsessed with basketball, video games, and pretending he didn't have a sister who existed. He'd thunder through the apartment in his oversized sneakers, leaving a trail of backpack straps and socks like some kind of teenage tornado. But he was good. Not just at basketball, at life. He had this easiness about him, a way of moving through the world like he belonged there. Nobody had taught him that. It was just in his bones. Our father had left when Malik was 6 months old. I was 5. My mom didn't talk about him much, and when she did, it was with the kind of tiredness that comes from deciding a long time ago not to be angry anymore. "He had his own demons," she'd say. "They just didn't include us." She'd said it so many times it became like a fact, like gravity. And she'd moved on, threw herself into the salon, into us, into this apartment that was small but clean and smelled like home. School was different. I went to Bronx Science, one of the specialized high schools you had to test into, and I was usually the only black girl, or one of 2, in my advanced math classes. I didn't think about it much until about 10th grade, when I realized other people definitely did. There was this particular way teachers would look at you when you got a problem right, like they were genuinely surprised, like they'd been bracing for disappointment and had to recalibrate their faces. I had a best friend named Tasha who went to my school. We'd known each other since 4th grade, back when neither of us was thinking about being the only one of anything. She was in AP Lit and I was in AP Calc, but we'd sit in the cafeteria together during lunch, and she'd watch me work through problem sets with this expression of pure bafflement. "How do you even see that?" she'd ask, looking at my notebook. "See what?" "The answer. You just know it?" "I don't know it, I just follow the logic. It's like the numbers tell you where they need to go." She'd shake her head. "You're speaking alien right now." But it wasn't alien to me. It was the opposite of alien. It was the most natural thing in the world, the way my brain arranged itself around mathematics, the way my mom's hands arranged themselves around hair. It was home. I didn't have a boyfriend. I barely had time for friends outside of Tasha. School, then home to help my mom close up the salon, do homework, tutor Malik through his math homework even though he complained about it constantly. My life was small and ordered and exactly the right size for me. I had a plan. Graduate, go to a state school with a full scholarship. I had good grades, good test scores, though I wasn't allowed to take the SAT yet because the prep courses cost money and my mom had said not to even think about it. We'd figure it out. And study engineering. Maybe MIT, maybe not. Somewhere I could be around people who thought the way I did, who didn't look at you like you were performing a magic trick every time you understood calculus. That was my life. That was the before. Then, on a Tuesday in February, my mom came home from the salon with a flyer. She dropped it on the kitchen table while I was doing my pre-calculus homework, not looking at me, like she was trying to be casual about it. My mom was many things, but casual wasn't one of them. Every gesture meant something. "Read that," she said. I picked it up. It was the color of cheap paper, printed in blue ink that had faded slightly, like it had been sitting somewhere for a while. Bronx Science Summer Mentorship Program, it said. For students interested in STEM fields. Partner schools include Columbia, Yale, and Harvard. "We're not paying for it," she said quickly, sitting down at the table. "It's free. Full scholarship. They even provide lunch." "Ma, I don't have time for—" "You make time," she said. It wasn't a suggestion. "This is the kind of thing that gets you noticed. This is how you get into the schools you're talking about, not from sitting at home doing homework." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that my homework was fine, my grades were fine, I was fine. But my mom had this look on her face, the same look she got when she was about to do something that cost her. Like she was making a decision that would take something from her to give to me. "Okay," I said. "Okay? Okay, I'll apply." She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that meant she'd already decided I was going. Applications be damned. She stood up and kissed the top of my head, and her hair smelled like the salon, coconut oil, and other women's dreams. That was the first crack in the normal, the first tiny indication that something was about to shift. I didn't know it yet, of course. I was 17 years old, and I thought the biggest problem in my life was whether I'd have time to finish my problem set before Malik needed help with his algebra. I didn't know that in a few months I'd be sitting in a Harvard professor's office, that my life would become the kind of story people tell each other in hushed voices, that being smart, actually genuinely, undeniably smart, would turn out to be the thing that put a target on my back. But the flyer was sitting there on the kitchen table, and my mom was watching me look at it, and somewhere in the apartment, Malik was yelling at his video game, and everything was about to change. I just didn't know it yet. The girl who solved it continued. The email arrived on a Wednesday in late June, just as I was closing up Crown Works with my mom. The subject line read, "Harvard Summer Mentorship Program, Acceptance." I read it 3 times, standing in the doorway between the salon and our apartment, my phone screen blurring slightly because my hands were shaking. My mom looked up from sweeping, saw my face, and didn't ask. She just walked over and pulled me into a hug that smelled like coconut oil and lavender. "You got in," she said. It wasn't a question. I got in. The program started in early July. I took the train from the Bronx to Cambridge every single day, sitting in a small classroom with 7 other students, 3 of them black, 1 Latinx, 2 Asian, 2 white, and the only teacher who seemed to understand that we weren't there to be grateful for the opportunity. Dr. Marcus Whitmore was different. He was a Harvard professor, yes, but he treated us like we were already mathematicians, already people whose minds mattered. He didn't talk down. He didn't congratulate us for being smart as if it was a miracle. He assumed competence, and that made all the difference. On the second day, he wrote an equation on the whiteboard. Not the famous one yet, that came later. This was just a warm-up, a complex differential equation that required 3 different approaches. He gave us 40 minutes. I finished in 15 and spent the rest of the time checking my work 3 times over, because I couldn't believe it was that straightforward. When he collected the papers, he glanced at mine and did a double take. "Walk me through your 3rd step," he said, pointing to a particular line. I explained my logic. He listened, really listened, without interrupting. And when I finished, he nodded slowly. "That's elegant," he said. "That's actually more efficient than the standard approach. Where'd you learn that?" "I didn't," I said. "It just seemed like the right way." He smiled, and it was the kind of smile that changed everything. "Come to my office hours tomorrow. I want to show you something." That's where it all started. Not the problem itself, that came later. But the beginning of everything was that smile, that recognition, that moment when I realized that there were spaces in the world where being smart wasn't an anomaly. It was just who you were. Dr. Whitmore's office was on the third floor of the science building, a small room packed with books and papers and a whiteboard that covered an entire wall. He closed the door when I came in, nothing sinister about it, just wanting privacy to talk, and gestured for me to sit. Instead of starting with what he'd mentioned, he asked me about myself. Where I was from, what I wanted to study, whether I'd thought about MIT or Caltech or staying on the East Coast. I haven't really thought about it, I admitted. This is my first summer program. A month ago, I didn't even know I could do this. You can do more than this, he said. He paused, drumming his fingers on the desk. I want to show you something. It's a problem I've been working on for 3 years. Longer, actually. Mathematicians have been working on variations of it for decades. I haven't solved it yet, and I don't think I will. But I think you might find it interesting. He turned to the whiteboard and wrote out the equation. It was long, complex, with multiple variables and nested operations that seemed to spiral in on themselves. He stepped back and looked at it for a moment, then at me. I tell every student who comes through here that nobody's solved this, he said. In 30 years of my career, in 50 years of mathematical research into this particular problem set, nobody has cracked it. Not completely. There have been partial solutions, elegant approaches that get you 70, 80% of the way there. But the complete answer? No. I stared at the equation. There was something almost alive about it, the way the variables related to each other, the way each operation fed into the next. It was like looking at a lock and being able to see the shape of the key before anyone handed it to you. What would you do if you solved it? I asked. Publish, he said simply. It would be significant. Not Nobel Prize significant, but significant enough. There are applications in cryptography, in physics, in optimization theory, real-world uses. It's the kind of problem that matters. And you really think I could solve it? I think you have a kind of intuition that I've only seen in a handful of people in my entire career, he said. Most mathematicians are like mechanics. They know all the tools, they can apply them with precision, but they're still following a map someone else drew. You're different. You see the map and the landscape at the same time. I wanted to believe him. I wanted it so badly that my chest ached with it. But I was 17. I was from the Bronx. I didn't belong in this office, with this man who had a PhD from Princeton and had published papers I couldn't even begin to understand. The rational part of my brain kept trying to tell me that he was being kind, that this was what mentors did. They encouraged you. They made you feel special. But the other part of me, the part that lived in the numbers, knew he wasn't lying. Can I work on it? I asked. That's what I was hoping you'd say, he said. I'll print out some background materials. Take a week. See what you can do. I walked out of his office in a daze, the printed papers in a folder under my arm, my mind already spinning through possibilities, through approaches, through the architecture of the problem. I didn't notice Dr. Whitmore watching me from his doorway, or the expression on his face, something between hope and something else, something I would only understand much later when everything had fallen apart. For the next week, I worked on the problem every night after the program ended. I'd come home, eat dinner with my mom and Malik, help close up the salon, and then I'd go to my room and work. I filled 3 notebooks with calculations, with attempts and false starts, and moments of breakthrough that led nowhere. On Thursday night, I was so frustrated I almost threw my pencil across the room. The logic was there, I could feel it, but I couldn't quite grasp it. It was like trying to hold water in my hands. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when it came to me. Not like a lightning bolt, like something crystallizing. A pattern within the pattern, a symmetry that made everything else click into place. I sat up, grabbed my notebook, and started writing. My hand moved faster than my conscious mind, and for 30 seconds, I wasn't aware of anything except the pure mathematics of it, the way the solution unfolded like a flower blooming. When I finished, I read through what I'd written. Once. Twice. A third time, checking every step, looking for the error that had to be there. But there wasn't one. The equation balanced. The variables resolved. The answer was there, complete and elegant and true. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, holding my notebook, understanding that something in my life had shifted on its axis. The next morning, I brought the notebook to Dr. Whitmore's office during lunch. I was shaking so badly that I could barely hand it to him. He opened it, read through my work, and then he did something I wasn't expecting. He didn't say anything. He just kept reading, his face absolutely still, his eyes moving across the pages with increasing intensity. When he finished, he closed the notebook slowly and looked up at me. "How long did this take you?" he asked. "To solve it completely? About 30 seconds, last night. The rest of the week was walking around the problem." He set the notebook down on his desk and was quiet for a long moment. "Zara," he said finally, "this is correct. This is completely correct. Do you understand what this means?" "It means I solved it," I said. "It means you solved a problem that I've been unable to solve for 3 years, that my colleagues couldn't solve, that people who are much older and much more experienced than you couldn't solve." He picked up the notebook again, shaking his head slightly. "This is publishable. This is the real thing." I should have felt proud. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt something that was almost like fear. Because in that moment, I realized that I had just stepped into a different category of person. I was no longer just smart. I was the girl who solved it. And I had no idea what that was going to cost me. "What happens now?" I asked. "Doctor." Whitmore leaned back in his chair, and I saw something flash across his face, something that looked almost like calculation. "Now we write it up properly," he said. "We document the solution, we prepare it for publication, and we need to talk about attribution." "Attribution? Who gets credit as the author?" he said. "You did the work, Zara. This is your solution. But there's politics involved. There's the question of whether a 17-year-old can be the primary author on a paper, whether Harvard would want to publish something with your name on it." "Why wouldn't they?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'd lived my entire life knowing the answer. "Because of exactly who you are," he said, not unkindly. "A black girl from the Bronx. Some people would want to claim credit. Some people would want to water down your contribution. Some people would say you had help, that the solution is actually collaborative, that I deserve at least equal billing." "But I did it," I said. "I know," he said, "and I'm going to make sure that's clear. But we need to be strategic about this. We need to protect your work." I believed him then. I believed that he was looking out for me, that he had my best interests in mind. If I could go back to that moment, I would grab myself by the shoulders and tell myself to run. But I couldn't. I was 17, and I'd just solved an impossible problem, and someone I trusted was telling me that he would protect me. So I nodded, and I said okay, and I gave him my notebook. That was the first mistake. Over the next week, things moved quickly. Dr. Whitmore called me into his office again, and this time there was another professor there, Dr. Eleanor Chen, who taught differential equations and had a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. She read through my solution while I sat there, my heart hammering in my chest, and when she finished, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "This is very impressive," she said. "How much help did you get from Dr. Whitmore?" The question hit me like a slap. "None," I said. "He gave me the problem. I solved it." "You're certain?" She was still looking at me with that unreadable expression. "I'm certain." She nodded slowly and then looked at Dr. Whitmore. "We should probably get this verified independently before we move forward with publication," she said. "Given the circumstances." "Of course," Dr. Whitmore said smoothly. "I was planning on that anyway." But there was something in his tone that made my stomach tighten. Something that said he hadn't been planning on it at all, and that Dr. Chen's suggestion was something he hadn't wanted to hear. 2 weeks later, I was called back to Dr. Whitmore's office. This time, his door was open, and Dr. Chen was there again, along with Dr. James Morrison, who was the chair of the mathematics department. My solution was printed out and sitting on the desk between us, marked up with notes and corrections in 3 different colors of pen. "Zara," Dr. Morrison said, and his voice had that particular tone that adults use when they're about to deliver bad news to a child. "We've had some colleagues review your work. Excellent work, by the way. But there are some questions we need to address." My mouth went dry. "Questions about what?" "About the methodology," Dr. Chen said. She pointed to a particular section of my work. This approach here, it's very similar to an approach Dr. Whitmore published in 2019. Did he discuss that paper with you? No, I said. He just gave me the problem. And you came up with this independently? Yes, I said. The word came out smaller than I wanted it to. Dr. Morrison exchanged a glance with Dr. Chen that I didn't like. The thing is, he said carefully, it's very difficult to prove independent discovery when the result is so similar to published work, especially when the student is working under the mentorship of the person who published the original work. I felt the ground shifting beneath me. But my solution is different, I said. It's not the same as his approach. We know, Dr. Whitmore said. He was watching me carefully, and there was something in his expression that I suddenly realized I'd been misreading. It wasn't protectiveness. It was something closer to pity. But the question isn't whether it's different. The question is whether you can prove it was independent. I have my notebooks, I said. I have my work from the whole week. Which you did here, Dr. Morrison said, not unkindly. In our building, where you had access to Dr. Whitmore's papers, his office, potentially his preliminary notes. We're not saying you copied anyone, but we need to be certain. So what does that mean? I asked. There was a silence, a terrible, stretching silence. Then Dr. Whitmore spoke. It means we're recommending that publication be delayed, he said, until we can be absolutely certain there's no question of impropriety. Impropriety? I heard my voice rising. I solved the problem. You gave me the problem, I solved it. And we believe you, Dr. Chen said, in a tone that suggested she absolutely did not. But in the academic world, perception matters as much as reality. We have a responsibility to the integrity of our publication. I looked at Dr. Whitmore, waiting for him to defend me, waiting for him to say that he knew I'd done the work independently, that he'd watched me struggle and figure it out on my own. But he just sat there, his fingers steepled in front of his mouth, not meeting my eyes. You can continue working on other problems, Dr. Morrison said. And once we've completed our review, if everything checks out, we'll move forward with publication. In the meantime, I'd recommend not discussing this with anyone. It could complicate the process. I nodded numbly. I stood up. I walked out of the office without saying anything else, and I didn't see the look that passed between the three of them, the look that said they'd already decided what the story was going to be. I didn't go back to the program the next day, or the next day after that. I told my mom I wasn't feeling well, and she didn't push it, though I could see her watching me with concern. I spent those days in my room, staring at my notebooks, reading through my work again and again, trying to find the moment where I'd stolen from Dr. Whitmore's brain. But it wasn't there. The solution was mine. I knew it in the core of myself, in the part of me that understood mathematics the way my mom understood hair. It was mine, and they were taking it from me. On the fourth day, my mom came into my room and sat down on my bed. She didn't say anything at first, just sat there, her presence solid and real in a way that the rest of my life suddenly wasn't. "Talk to me," she said finally. So I did. I told her everything, about the problem, about the solution, about Dr. Whitmore and Dr. Chen and Dr. Morrison, and the accusations that weren't quite accusations but were definitely accusations. I told her about the silence in that office, about the way Dr. Whitmore hadn't defended me. My mom listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Did you solve it?" "Yes," I said. "And you did it on your own?" "Yes." "Then that's the truth," she said. "And the truth matters." "But they're saying—" "I know what they're saying," she said. Her voice had gone quiet and hard in a way I'd rarely heard. "They're saying you're a 17-year-old black girl from the Bronx, and you can't possibly be smarter than a Harvard professor. So instead of accepting that, they're going to make it your problem. They're going to investigate you, doubt you, make you prove yourself while they walk free." I'd never heard my mom sound angry like that. Disappointed, yes. Frustrated, definitely. But not angry. And hearing that anger, knowing it was on my behalf, made something break inside me. "What do I do?" I asked. "First," she said, "you're going to call that lawyer." "What lawyer?" "The one your uncle knows. The one who handles employment discrimination cases. Because what they're doing to you is discrimination, baby." They might not call it that, but that's what it is. The lawyer's name was Sheila Torres, and she worked out of a small office in downtown Manhattan. She was in her 50s, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that didn't miss anything. My mom came with me to the appointment, and the first thing Ms. Torres did was ask me to walk her through the entire situation. No judgment, just careful notes and questions that went deeper than I expected. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me for a long moment. "Do you still have your notebooks?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Everything, every step of the work." "And the emails from Dr. Whitmore?" "He came to my office hours in person. There are emails about the program, but nothing specific about the problem or the solution." "That's actually good for us," she said. "It means there's no written record of him coaching you through it. What about the other professors? Did they send you anything in writing?" "No," I said. "The meeting was in person." She nodded, making a note. "Here's what I think is happening," she said. "Dr. Whitmore gave you a problem he couldn't solve. You solved it. That's a threat to his reputation, or at least it could be, depending on how the story gets told. So he's preemptively creating doubt about your work. He's getting the department to question your independence, your integrity, the validity of your solution. By the time this is over, even if you're vindicated, the solution will be tainted. People will always wonder. "So what do I do?" I asked. "We fight," she said simply. "We gather documentation, we get witnesses. We prove that your work is yours, and that this investigation is a pretext for discrimination. And we make it very clear that we're willing to go public if they try to bury this." "Is that going to work?" my mom asked. "I don't know," Ms. Torres said honestly. "But I know it's better than sitting quiet and letting them write the story." The next week I went back to Harvard, not to Dr. Whitmore's office, to the administration building, where I sat down with the dean of students and told her everything. I brought my notebooks. I brought my emails. I brought the dates and times of every meeting, every conversation. And I brought the truth. The dean listened carefully. She was a woman in her 60s named Dr. Patricia Hoffman, and she had the kind of authority that comes from not giving a shit what anyone thinks. When I finished, she sat back in her chair and studied me. "Did Dr. Whitmore ever suggest that you had access to his papers?" she asked. "No," I said. "He gave me the problem, that was it." "And you worked on it independently?" "Yes." She nodded slowly. "I'm going to tell you something that you need to understand," she said. "What Dr. Whitmore and his colleagues are doing is not uncommon. Young people solve problems. Older people take credit. It's an old story. But what makes it worse in your case is that they're not just taking credit. They're questioning your ability, your integrity, your right to be here. And that's because of who you are." "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "we open a formal investigation. And I want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. The university will have resources available to you. A counselor, a mentor who's not part of the math department, legal support. This is going to be difficult, but you're going to be supported." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that the institution would protect me, that the truth mattered, that being smart and being right would be enough. But I'd already learned that lesson. I'd learned it in that office with 3 professors and their careful words and their implications. The investigation took 6 weeks. I was interviewed by a panel of 3 professors from outside the mathematics department, 1 from Yale and 2 from other departments at Harvard. Ms. Torres sat with me during the interviews. I was asked to walk through my work again, to explain my methodology, to prove that I understood every single step of my solution. It was humiliating and validating at the same time. Humiliating because I had to justify myself, but validating because it became increasingly clear, even to the skeptical panelists, that I understood the mathematics better than anyone in the room. They also interviewed Dr. Whitmore. I wasn't in the room for it, but Ms. Torres got the transcript. He claimed that he had discussed his 2019 paper with me, that he'd pointed out similar approaches, that my solution was a natural extension of ideas we'd discussed. He said it carefully, in ways that couldn't quite be called lies but also couldn't be called truth. He said he wasn't questioning my competence, just noting that the derivation showed signs of his influence. But then they checked the facts. They looked at his 2019 paper. They looked at my notebooks. They looked at the timeline of when I'd started the work versus when he claimed to have discussed his previous work with me. And the story fell apart. The panel issued their findings in late August. Their conclusion was unambiguous. My solution was entirely my own work, derived independently and without assistance from Dr. Whitmore or any other faculty member. They found that Dr. Whitmore's claims of having influenced my approach were not supported by evidence and appeared to be an attempt to claim credit for work that was not his own. They recommended that the mathematics department move forward with publication of my solution under my sole authorship. And they also recommended that Dr. Whitmore be required to take an ethics course and to submit all future collaborative work with students to external review. I read the findings in a small office with Dean Hoffman and Ms. Torres. When I finished, I set the paper down on the desk and I felt nothing. Not relief, not vindication, just an empty, hollow exhaustion. "This is a win," Ms. Torres said, watching my face. "You should know that. They could have split the difference. They could have suggested collaborative authorship. Instead, they completely validated your work." "But he's still here," I said. "He's still teaching. He's still going to be at Harvard next year." "Yes," Dean Hoffman said, "but he's been officially reprimanded, and every student who works with him in the future will be aware of this situation. His credibility is damaged. That matters." I nodded, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Because I'd seen something in that office with Dr. Whitmore and his colleagues. I'd seen how easy it was to take someone's truth and wrap it in doubt. How a single whisper of impropriety could taint everything, even when the investigation cleared you. I'd learned that being right wasn't enough. You had to be right and protected and powerful. My solution was published in November under my single authorship. The paper came out in a prestigious mathematics journal, and it got more attention than I expected. There were news articles, not many, but a few. 17-year-old solves decades-old problem. Bronx student achieves mathematical breakthrough. My high school newspaper did a profile. Teachers started treating me differently, some with increased respect, some with something that looked like resentment. But something had shifted inside me. I'd won, technically. My work was published. My name was on the paper. The investigation had cleared me. But I'd also learned something about how the world worked, about how people in power could try to take what wasn't theirs, about how being brilliant could make you a target instead of protecting you. Dr. Whitmore never apologized. He did the ethics training that was required of him, and he continued teaching. He was careful not to directly interact with me when I came back to the Harvard program in subsequent summers, but I'd see him in the hallways sometimes, and he'd look away first. That was something, I suppose. But the real consequence came from somewhere else entirely. In March of my senior year of high school, I got an email from a professor at MIT. She'd read my paper. She wanted me to apply early admission. She wanted me to work in her lab. She wanted to make sure that no one else tried to take credit for my work. She wanted to protect me, she said, the way the system should have in the first place. I cried when I read that email, not because she was offering me a spot at MIT, though that was incredible, but because it meant that there were people in this world who saw what had happened to me and understood it for what it was. Who would stand between me and the people who wanted to diminish my work, who believed that I belonged here not despite who I was, but because of exactly who I was. In the end, that was the real lesson. Not that being smart was dangerous, though it was. Not that institutions would fail you, though they would. But that there were people who understood that the world was broken and were committed to fixing it, one brilliant girl at a time. I graduated from high school in June with the highest honors. My mom closed the salon early that day and came to my ceremony. Malik screamed when they called my name. Ms. Torres was there, sitting next to my mom. Dean Hoffman sent a card. Dr. Whitmore sent a generic congratulations email that I deleted without responding. In August, I packed my things, not much, just what I could carry, and took the train from the Bronx to Cambridge. I was going to MIT, and I was going to solve bigger problems, and I was going to make sure that every black girl who came after me knew that they belonged here too. The world had tried to take my truth from me, but they'd failed, and now I knew what I was capable of. Now I knew that I was more than smart. I was unbreakable. And that made all the difference.